Welcome back to the Grace Fellowship Podcast. Glad to have you with us again. We have so much going on right now. It's the fall. It's actually cold today.
Yeah.
We all have on our sweaters, and I think I'm like triple layered here. I'm just about bones. So, having a good time. Lots going on. We have a few announcements. David, you had your family's count here. First class on.
So we just had our second
class. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we've got a big class this time. Barry and Donna Ryan teach that class. Charlie Gardner and Carrie Wright have just done a fantastic job. They coordinate everything, talking with those attending the class and working the meals out. This Sunday we had the Henrys home group. They cooked chili for us and cooked desserts, and it's just such a blessing to be a part of that class. You know, what we're doing is bringing in parents or guardians, custodians who are working towards reunification with their children or trying to keep that custody. And I know we keep talking through that a lot, but it's just so cool that like this was our second week, so those that were attending, their guard was down a little bit. They felt more comfortable. And we're just serving food. And they're like, who is cooking this food for us? And I just got to say, man, that's our home groups. We have a home group, the Henrys. They did this. And one lady in particular is just like, man, that's just so nice. Like, why are y'all doing this? And just to say all that for you, church, that, like, you're loving these people. You may not even see their faces. We actually had a few of our participants come to church this Sunday and be a part of it, and it's just a big deal. My mom and dad do I sat in the first class. They just do a fantastic job of, I know I'm biased, but teaching that class, being personal with these people and vulnerable and just loving on them. Just to watch everybody's guard drop and see that, like, these are people that care about where I'm at, what I'm going through, the hardships I'm in, and can speak truth to me in love. It's just really cool. So church, if y'all can just continue to pray for us, pray for those attending, pray for those leading it. And home groups like the Henry's home group, y'all are such a blessing to us as we're trying to serve, and also to those you're serving. And we would love for more home groups to be a part of that. If you want to be a part of the meal, just let Carrie Wright know, or Charlie Gardner know, or me know. And even like hanging out, a few of you in your home group, hang out and serve that meal. Eat lunch with us. Get to know these people that you're serving. We would love that. They would love it too. So
that's awesome. I know that Bruce and Tammy Haynes are going to provide a meal. They've let us know that. And then Adam and Lane Allen are going to provide a meal. So, if your home group would like to provide a meal for that on a Sunday afternoon, that would be wonderful. And I think this is one of those ministries that you may not be able to be a part of every week, but like David's saying, if you could just drop in, spend some time, shake some hands with these people, I think just these folks knowing that they've got people in their corner, people that are rooting for them, people that are loving them and willing to serve them is fantastic. So love that ministry, man. Love seeing those folks.
It's
and
cool.
That was awesome. Another big thing we got coming up this month, at the end of the month, is on October.
Before that, this Saturday we got Parenting Clinic.
Parenting Clinic, thank you.
We've got Parenting Clinic, Gospel Center Discipline, how to discipline your children, and something that we've actually had others request this. We've done some in the past with different topics, and many people said, what about discipline? Can we talk about discipline? So I do believe it's one of the hardest things that we encounter as parents, and a lot of y'all are shaking your heads that we are going through it. You know, how are you disciplining all the kids in your house, all different ages, all different personalities. Just a lot there. So a lot there. So
and then the October 25th, just keep pushing. Talk to Elizabeth Brannon and others. Gail McClellan, look on Facebook for the announcement. But that's the night that we're having the women's shower, or the mother's shower, expected mother's shower for Hope Women's Clinic. And just a testimony again to the goodness of God through the church. Elizabeth posted just a thank you to the women. They put a registry up on Amazon and different places, and I think all the gifts have been bought by the church.
I just helped Elizabeth unload her van, and it was a whole van full of stuff. And it's just amazing.
And so what that's doing is providing the basic necessities, needs, special items that a young mom and father who were in a tough spot, and they had the choice of should I seek an abortion or should I have this child? And they went to Hope Women's Clinic and received help and counsel and love and nurturing in the path of choosing life and cheering them on. And now Grace Fellowship's been able to come alongside that and just give this shower to them where we can shower them with the love that somebody would receive if they were a part of a church, which makes, I think one of the things that we want to be always trying to push into is those who feel like, or maybe they are, pushed to the fringes of society. They feel like they have nobody in their corner. They feel like they're just all alone and having to make these huge life choices and decisions like parenting or keeping a child versus aborting a child. We want them as a church to feel like, no, you're important to us.
That's right.
And the more people, I would actually say, I know it gets a little chaotic maybe with new groups every week going through families counting, providing food. But I mean, think about the testimony that is to those that were participating in the class to go, man, there were 6 people here last week. Now there's 5 other people here this week.
Right.
And there's these people this week. And they feel like, hey, we've got like an army of people around that we could recognize their face and say, I'm in a tough spot. Could you help me out?
Yeah.
Like that's a big win for those who are in a needy place, and we all are in needy places.
That's right.
Everybody is, and so I'm just thankful to the church. Thankful for David heading this up, Elizabeth for heading hers up, and the people kicking in and serving is just so awesome.
And I think, we just got done with figuring out our missions budget for this year about what we're going to give those organizations and all those people we help. And it's always good as a church, as an organization, as, the institutional side, to give money. But it's so much better for our people to actually get their hands dirty, if you will, and dig in. There's just nothing like that. So thank you, church. Yeah, thank you for all the ministry that you're doing. And please just continue to come up with more and find more ways to serve, because these ministries, they weren't necessarily but especially these two, they weren't heralded kind of from the pastors down. It was kind of like grassroots kind of popped up, and so saw opportunities and made those things happen. And so that's wonderful. The big event we've got coming up for our people, but really, church, this is an outreach. There are fall festivals and trick or treats and all kinds of things going on October 30th, 31st, 29th, all that weekend. And we have our Reformation celebration coming up on Sunday, October 30th. And that's going to be from 4:30 to 6:30, where all the cars and trunks will have candy, we'll have inflatables, we'll have tons of fun, lots of things to do. And then at 6:30, we'll actually have a Reformation, what we're calling show or dramatization. It's really geared toward the kids. So if you've been a part of Grace Fellowship for a long time, you know that this has always been the service portion where things are talked about, the solas are talked about, and it's kind of went through. What we're trying to gear it toward this year is more geared for children. So children can come in and they can sing a song and they can hear Carlton dressed up like a reformer, give a dramatization, a 5-minute dramatization, and then another song and another dramatization. And so we're really just wanting to pass on this history to our people, but to our kids. Like, this is something to celebrate when a tough decision was made for the truth to see God's church reformed. And so that's happening on October 30th. Make sure you get your home group involved and decorate a car, very fallish, and then come out and enjoy candy and stuff.
And one intentional part of this show is, I know as parents, especially Reformation celebration, there's a lot of pressure you feel to let your kids get all jacked up on candy and having fun, and then let's go in here and sit and worship and listen. Right. A lot of pressure, like, how in the world are we going to do it? And they're getting tired and cranky bedtime.
Right.
Like, we want our children in there. We want you as parents, and we want the noises. We like not to come and be chaotic, but don't let that pressure make you go home. Yeah. Like, we are designing this whole experience, this whole show, so that it's for the kids. So
that's right.
Stay, hang out, be a part of that.
Yeah, and you saw flyers on Sunday. Christian Dunn helped us up with a great graphic. We're going to be spreading that on social media. You've got that so cool. Physical copy in your hand you can give out at work or post that on a bulletin board or something. We really want the entire community to come, but we're also, part of that is we partner with our sister churches, Mountain View and Redeemer, and Anniston Bible, and they'll all be here participating, decorating cars. So it should really be an awesome time. And shout out to our deacons who are putting all that together and making all this happen. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we're excited. But here's the thing. We're talking about topics for podcast, and this was actually we thought a good topic to talk about. We know that lots of people on this very same weekend will be celebrating Halloween, and so we're going to talk a little bit about Halloween, but also just about holidays in general. We know that we live in a culture that isn't Christ-centered, isn't biblical in its nature, and so there's all kinds of celebrations and festivals that are around all kinds of different things that on the surface a lot of times may seem very innocent, but at its root maybe it's come up out of a really dark system or celebration or that kind of thing, and so we know a lot of you at Grace Fellowship are very intentional to look into these. You're very intentional in the way that you parent, very intentional in what you expose your kids to and not expose your kids to. And so we thought today's podcast would be a great time to just discuss, celebrations, annual type things. You got Halloween or what we do, Reformation celebration. You got Christmas, you got Easter, you got all these different celebrations. And so, Carlton, we'll just kick it to you for a second, since you're the oldest around the table and have been doing this a little longer than us. How have you guys approached these things, holidays, you and Amy, with your kids, and maybe help us even see maybe what you've discovered as you've looked into over the years some of these different festivals and why you do certain things and why you don't?
Sure. Well, I think it is, first of all, it's just something that I would say is that we need to have a lot of grace with one another around these issues.
It's a great point.
I think that the danger is to become really rigid. My view is the right view. Everybody ought to do it my way. And then not respecting and loving one another. Also, be careful. We got to be careful not to make assumptions about people. So, you see your Christian friend and they're on Facebook and they put pictures of their kids all dressed up and going door to door and trick-or-treating. And in your heart, you're like, I just can't believe Christian people would ever act that way. I mean, what are they thinking? They're doing the wrong thing with their children. I think it's really important that we as a community embrace one another wherever possible. And to be gracious with one another wherever possible. So, of course, we don't want to have clear violations of something God has said do or don't do. But this is not an area where, as much as people will take the Bible verses, one or two verses here or there, and twist to say, oh, if you do this, then you're being an idolatrous person or you're doing this. The reality is, too, that the reason we can have so much grace in a pluralistic society like we live in, these holidays and traditions now have been so far removed from those early days of when it was being celebrated, maybe in a way that wasn't helpful, that the people in general, Christian or non-Christian, they don't even know the roots of it. For the majority. I mean, there may be some that do, but the majority of people just don't know.
We didn't growing up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so if you take an instance, because we're close to it, Halloween. Well, the history of that goes back to the Samhain celebration of the Celtic people, probably well over 2,000 years ago. And then in 43 A.D., Rome conquered the British Isles, the land of the Celtic people. And over the next 400 years, up till later on, what the Romans often did, they were a syncretistic people. So when they conquered a land, they often sought to keep important parts of the conquered people's land, their culture, and it brought cohesiveness in the sense of Rome is kind of our overlord, but we have a lot of independence as long as we reverence Caesar, pay taxes. And so a lot of times the celebrations that were localized became empire-wide. They kind of started spreading because they brought these things in. And then you add to that the church layer, the Roman Catholic Church, and it began. These things began to blend together. So you have, both the pagan and the Christian worldviews kind of coming together. And in a case like this, Pope Gregory III, I don't remember the year, but he sanctioned a celebration for what's called All Saints Day on November the 1st. So this was to celebrate great saints, who had died in the past to celebrate their deaths on November 1st as a tradition. Well, October 31st, the pagans were celebrating these Celtic holidays, so to speak, to worship for fertility, to worship for good crops, to ask God to survive, their gods to survive the winter cold, and they had all these traditions. And so what the church did over time was they, with the Pope Gregory III implementing All Saints Day on November 1st, it originally was another date, but he moved it to November the 1st. People began to celebrate All Saints Day Eve or All Hallows Eve in the church. And so that kind of spread through Europe. Now, it was resisted also. There were groups like the Puritans who never would celebrate things like this. And then that carried over through the Pilgrims into the United States. But around the 1800s, that became more normal, I would say, for people to celebrate, but they celebrated it as a fall festival. A celebration back then in an agrarian economy where the crops have been gathered in and we're headed into winter and we've been blessed with enough food to survive, and people just came together and celebrated. And there was good and bad associations with that. And now it's come all the way down to, since the 1920s and 30s, people started going door to door and getting initially like apples, and now candy, and we know all the trick or treating, the
we're
dressing
addicted
up,
to sugar as a culture.
And so, we're addicted to sugar.
I'm glad it's not
Nobody
apples
wants
anymore.
an apple. And so,
Where's the Sour Patch
you can
Kids?
see kind of the progress of this from a purely pagan to then what we might call, this is your area, Corey, syncretized celebrations, like the pagan celebration, the Christian celebration together, to now we've really come to just a pluralistic kind of celebration where most people don't even know what we're celebrating. It's just like, hey, it's fun. We spend billions of dollars on candy and costumes and all that every year. So everybody does it. Let's just do it. So that's just an example. So you'll see it called a fall festival. You'll see it called, Halloween party or whatever.
Trunk or treat.
Here at Grace Fellowship, we take it as an opportunity to celebrate Reformation. The Reformation. And we call it Reformation Day celebration intentionally because on October 31st, because it was All Hallows Eve, Luther took in 1517 his 95 Thesis and nailed it to the door of the church at Wittenberg to protest against the Catholic Church's excesses in lots of different areas. And so that began and sparked the reviving of the true church that believes in the Scriptures and the five basic statements of the Protestant faith were made and hammered out over the next years. And so we want to bring that history forward to teach our children. So that's what the kind of the thought process is.
And that's super helpful to know the history because, I mean, thank you for the brief history. I'm sure there's a lot more detail that you could probably nerd out and go into on that. But you just kind of see from what you told that it's a weird kind of mix, concoction, if you will. Everybody, through time, people are going to be like, well, let's throw this in it. Well, this sounds good to us. And so you just get this like weird thing and everybody's like, I don't know, like celebrating dead people. And, where did that come from? Why are we dressing up like ghosts and witches and, all this kind of stuff. So it does weird people out. But this is why we have to not just be a participant in our culture, but be wise in our culture to see, what is, I like to talk about good, bad, and then redeemable. Right? Yes. Like there are some things that we just go, hey, we can't participate over here. This is just bad altogether. But this sounds like one of those things, Carlton and David, if you agree, that it's probably in this redeemable category. At least we think so as a church. That's why we're doing the Reformation celebration. But how you look at it to celebrate it matters. Right?
Yeah. If you were to remove everything that had a bad connotation in it, then we would have to be monks that lived completely separate.
That's right.
So, I mean, that's marriage, it's parenting, it's church leadership, it's government, like anything. We can always bring bad experience, bad views into whatever's there. It's all over. So yes, I would say this is a redeemable area where we can engage as the kingdom of God in a good way and invite people to be a part of that with us. So
and what would you guys say to you talked about, Carlton, with the history. You kind of grab things that you like and leave things and certain things. Is that honest? Like, are we we being honest and true when we, for ourselves, as a community, as a church, as individual families, say, you know what, we're going to take this part, but we're going to leave that part. We're going to dress up our kids, or we're not going to dress up. We're going to do candy. We're not going to do candy. Like, what's thoughts on that?
I would just ask, I think it's a question worth asking.
Yeah.
And something we need to let our conscience guide us on, and we don't need to have heavy rules about. But one question I ask myself, and I've asked others, is where are we going to draw the line? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're not going to do anything surrounding the fall time because that has a lot of connotations to it with Halloween. Okay, so are we going to do Christmas? You know, there's lots of things surrounding Christmas and a lot of pagan traditions with the winter solstice. Are we going to do Easter? I mean, the early Easter pageants really took in a lot of the pagan culture into the early Easter practice as far as eating together, drinking lots of wine, tons of parties, and pageants. The Roman Church got into pageants, which was a takeoff on pagan culture and their pageants. And so we're not going to celebrate Easter. Are we going to celebrate, this one may cause lots of controversy, are we going to celebrate birthdays? You know, our Puritan forefathers never celebrated a birthday because they viewed that as exalting the self above everything else and to almost akin to idolatry, to go beyond anything than a recognition of, hey, son, another year around the sun, you know, another trip around the sun. Great job. Let's go to work. I mean, they didn't give gifts to one another on those days. They didn't have cakes. They didn't sing songs, because it was exalting the child and the self. And so I'm just saying, we, like David said, we have so many things that we think, oh, that has no pagan roots. But when you start digging down, you're like, oh, well, actually, some people thought it did. And then there's lots of controversy around that. And so it's not as clean cut as we're looking for black and white. There's a lot of gray. Yeah. That's the reality. Yeah. And so I think that's why the grace is necessary. So as we're looking at this as a church, we can sit on the sidelines and we can tell our kids, hey, no dressing up, no celebrating this. This is what the world does. We don't do this. And maybe that's really safe. I think what probably happens there is parents, you know, go around their neighborhoods and they just don't take pictures of it and put it on Facebook because they're afraid of the church. You know, it's like, well, I'm going to do it, but I'm not going to tell anybody I'm going to do it. Yeah. That's not a good thing. You know, that's not very, very helpful. Right. Or they're not going to do it, and they're going to begin to look out and say, "Look at that church over there doing that." I mean, I can't believe they're going to become they could become real judgmental. Sure. I think that you could take it a lot of different directions. Yeah. What we chose to do as a church was to, as you said, redeem something. So let's make it purposeful. So from the very beginning, we've had fall festivals. We've called it the Reformation Celebration, and we've incorporated the preaching of the gospel, the celebration of the history of the church and how God's blessed the church with a tremendous history of keeping the gospel pure and clean all the way down to today. And so our children get to dress up and have a good time, yet they're not doing it in the same exact way, at least here with us. They're not doing it in the same exact way as they might do it in other contexts. And so that was a decision we made early on. We're thankful our other churches are with us in it, and they celebrate with us, so that brings a real dynamic of community.
That's super helpful. And I think experience, too, have been a kid raised in a Christian home, that we celebrated these holidays. We celebrated Halloween. Of course, we did that through a fall festival at our church. Celebrated Christmas. Sure. We did Santa Claus. My wife's choking right now. But we did Santa Claus. My dad would always dress up like Santa Claus and roll out with his bag on Christmas morning and joke around. We did Easter egg hunts. Yeah. We did all those things. But as a kid, and I'm not endorsing that you do that, but as a kid, when it came to Christmas, I didn't think Christmas was about Santa. I knew Christmas, the point and the meaning of Christmas was our Savior's birth, was Emmanuel. Yeah. Here he is. Because while we had these pieces, and again, I'm not condoning the pieces, right? I'm just making a case. Sure. I'm just telling what I grew up in. We had the pieces of the secular. We still had the substance that was so important. Same thing with Easter. We did Easter egg hunt every year, but I knew what Easter was about. Easter was about getting some fresh clothes, some Tommy Hilfiger stuff, and showing up to church and celebrating and singing. Those were going to be the biggest songs of the year. It was going to be the biggest presentation. Jesus was going to show up out of somewhere, resurrected from some side door, or come in, But it was like that was the point of Easter. And so I think just from my experience, parents, when you're thinking about this, I think we can kind of get to a place where we're overanalyzing quite a bit. And I think what David would probably, and I'm going to kick it to you, David, what David would probably want us to do, being kind of leading us as parents and families, is really make sure, like the non-negotiable here is really prioritize the good, really prioritize the positive, really making sure we put an emphasis on what's true and important, and then the other stuff, I think you
Take
said,
it or leave it.
Yeah, like let's just be like let's be loose with it. David, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just think this is a topic that is just so beneficial for our families to hear. It's something that I think a lot of people are maybe afraid to ask. Their own families, because they know the traditions being brought in, and not even knowing how to ask other people in their community. The biggest thing that you've got to make sure, and this goes with every area of parenting, is that you're communicating with your spouse, first of all, and if you're a single parent, that you have some people around you supporting you and helping be a soundboard for how you're parenting, but communicating with your children, like always communicating with your children why you're doing things, why you're not doing things. And the way you communicate is age appropriate, and even better than that is developmentally appropriate. So we might have some kids that we might think, oh, they're 16, we can have this really hard conversation. Well, developmentally, they may not be there yet, or developmentally, they may be way beyond that. You should have had that conversation a few years before. So that's where you as a parent really have to know your children individually and where they're at, and know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you may not have all the answers, but as parents, you wrestling through these things of, are we going to do Santa Claus? Because how did your family do it? You're talking to your spouse, how did y'all do it growing up? Well, this is how we did it. Are we just going to do it that way because that's how we did it? I don't think that's healthy. Right. I think you can bring certain things to it. But just, for example, the way we handle Santa Claus, and parents, if your kids are listening now and you want to turn it off, that's fine. If I ruin it, then fantastic. Let's go. But we recognized, and again, our parenting journey's been a lot different. We had children come into our family that had never been told the truth before about things. And so for us, it was important that we not confuse them when it came to something. Yes. We were trying so hard to teach our children the gospel, and that it was fully truth. And so for us, it was a confusing message to try to spend the whole year teaching them the gospel, and then this one celebration, or you take Easter with it as well, then we're throwing in this other thing that is not true and can be confusing to what we're trying to do. So I'm sure we messed it up early on, and we're still working through those things. Where we try to balance that is God gave us imaginations. God gave us a spirit of playfulness. Like He wants us to have fun and enjoy these things. So while we don't do all the traditional Santa Claus experiences, to where the elf is on the shelf, and we may not do all of those things. And like you were saying, like if you're doing those things, just do them in balance. We want our kids to understand the truth of what we're celebrating, and that can be done with Santa, with other things, as long as the communication is happening with your children. So what that looks like for us is like Sanders, Halloween. Sanders dresses up 364 days out of the year in some costume. So for us to tell him, no, we're not dressing up this day, like, what is that? What's going on there?
Him and Knox Richardson.
That's right. Like
superheroes.
We are the safest, us and the Richardsons are the safest families in the world because we have superheroes living with us.
That's right.
And it's a blended superhero. It might be a Power Ranger with Iron Man. It's
so good to watch.
It's
that
beautiful.
Incredible duo.
These different people.
Put
together, and I ask them who they are, and they're like telling me they got this whole story about this character, and I'm like,
They've gotten so creative. They'll turn the outfits inside out, and now they're a new kid. It's a whole new character.
Yeah. And so that's a Halloween thing. Go back to Christmas, and the Chronicles of Narnia helped me out with this. There's just one scene there. One is just your imagination the whole time. You're engaged with this, whether you're reading it or watching it. It's just forcing your brain to use its imagination. And these aren't real things, but it's somebody's imagination that's helping us see a great truth. And if we don't have imaginations, then there's a whole lot of scripture that we're not going to understand or even try to touch. So, so there's the scene in Narnia where the three siblings, Edmund is with the White Witch, and then Peter and Lucy, and oh goodness, I'm forgetting one. Y'all got it? Y'all gonna help me out?
No.
The three siblings are running. They're with the beaver family, and they're running from the wolves, and they're trying to be caught. Well, then there's this character that shows up on a sleigh, being pulled, and he's got a beard, and he's big, and he comes up with gifts and is giving them to the children. It was Santa Claus, and I'm like, whoa! C.S. Lewis just threw Santa in the Chronicles of Narnia, and like that was a cool way. And he was just a giver of gifts, and like that's something we want our kids to do. We want them to know it's good to give gifts and to receive gifts and to love those things. Was he the main point of the whole story? Absolutely not. He wasn't. He was just a small scene, and the main focus was on Aslan, this king, and his redeeming power, him bringing his kingdom to this world that had been crumbling under the White Witch. So, like, that's the kind of communication that we have to have with our children, developmentally appropriate to where they can understand, man, this is all about Christ. This is all about him. And we can use our imagination.
Yeah.
Another example, the other night we were camping, and we just had a fantastic trip, and we're sitting around the fire, and I was asking the boys, like, hey, y'all want to tell a story? Somebody tell me a story. And they just didn't have anything. They were tired. I said, all right, let's tell a story. And so I just start making something up and changing their name a little bit. And they loved. They were hanging on every word. And then Lydia gave me the look, like, okay, let's go wrap it up. So I started landing the plane with them and finished the story. And Bennett's 7, he was like, man, that was awesome. That was so great. That's where their minds are. And so to take advantage of that imagination and the creativity of different time periods in our year, like the traditional things or the celebrations, like there is some good things that God has gifted us with dressing up, with engaging our community. So let's grab those good things, redeem them, and help our children also see, like, we have a great God that created your brain to think that way to enjoy those things and keep the main thing the main thing.
So
I think one thing that I would add to that, it's so good what David's just said, is we have values.
Yeah.
And those values are built on the Word of God and on the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they bleed down into all of our life, the way we treat our wife, the way we treat our kids, the way we treat our business, the way we treat our church, the way we treat everything. So we have values. We want to be teaching our children values. One of the things that helps protect values are traditions.
Yeah.
And so one thing I would encourage people is think, what is your family tradition? Like, you could bring any of the Weathers children in here, and you could ask them, what do y'all do around Halloween? And they're going to talk about this tradition at Grace Fellowship. And my 18-year-old and 21-year-old will say to me, or soon to be 21-year-old, they'll say to me, "We're having the Reformation celebration, aren't we?" And they're asking questions about it. And you think about Christmas celebration. We've built traditions around that, and we've alternated through years. Like, we've done years where we went and served meals, hot meals. Like, we opened gifts, and then we as a family loaded up, and we spent some time at a homeless shelter. Or we've made meals for homebound people and taken it to them. Yeah. We've made cookies. Now we do a lot of cookie making, and we make cookies. And the girls especially will go give those cookies out to other people and wish them a Merry Christmas. And just teaching our children to give. So those are traditions they expect. They expect a Christmas Eve candlelight service, because at Grace Fellowship we got to be weird, and so it's December 23rd for us. My son is 18 years old, and he will tell you his most favorite thing about the Christmas celebration is our Christmas Eve candlelight service where the gospel, the 9 lessons and carols is done. We light a candle at the end. Everybody sings together. That's what Christmas is to him. That's what. Now, alongside that, we didn't forbid any of this other stuff. We didn't celebrate it huge at our house like Santa Claus and all those things. But when our kids came home and said, Santa Claus this or that, we didn't stop them and go, okay, now listen, what you're talking about is not real. And with this over here, this is real. But here's the thing. Our kids knew, because we built traditions that were around the gospel all year round. They were like, boy, yeah, I don't know about that, but I know the gospel's real.
Right.
I know. So I think sometimes we get afraid as a parent, and we don't need to be. There's different situations. David brought up a situation where they were basically taking in children in their situation as a house parent. Those children have been lied to a lot in their lives. Those children have been disappointed, let down, built expectations that didn't follow through. They don't know the gospel. So that's a different scenario than David's natural-born children growing up in his home, hearing the gospel every single opportunity. But even simpler traditions, and I know this gets us a little further down, we can say we value family, but what are we doing every day, every week as a pattern to value family? Like, are we building traditions that speak to our values? And so one resource on this as we get ready, I know we're pushing to close. Noel Piper years ago wrote a great book, a little small book on family traditions. And I would recommend it highly. And it's basically just what I've said, but in a better way. She says in a much better way. And Noel did a wonderful job, her and John Piper, of building their own traditions for their children that spoke the value. And they were kind of odd to everybody else. Like, I think I remember they didn't have a Christmas tree. They had a manger scene with an empty manger, and they would talk through the Christmas story a little bit at a time as they got ready for the. That's a wonderful thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Or if you want to go back, talking about Christmas, since it's going to be right around the corner, if you want to go back and say, hey, children, this is why we bring an evergreen tree in. This is the tradition. Martin Luther wrote a lot about that. We celebrate through an evergreen and lights, and all these things have Christian meanings. They can have, and teach your children that. Advent season at Grace Fellowship is huge. 5 Sundays where we're focused on Advent readings and lighting candles and sermons that point us to waiting on Christ. I mean, these are the things that we want to do to mark our values and say this is worth celebrating. So that's really what I'm saying.
I'd love to kind of tie what he's saying with what I was talking about with communication earlier. I think sometimes as parents, we might be scared to teach our children something truthful because of the confrontation that might come from that. So, like, if I tell my children that the Easter Bunny's not real, oh gosh, they're going to go to school and tell everybody the Easter Bunny's not real. And I don't want to be that parent. Like, and then some might go, yeah, I want to be that parent. Let's go. Where's the fight? And so trying to not put our children in a bad place unintentionally, but when the questions come, I'm not saying your child is born and you start telling them all the truth about Christmas and Easter and Halloween, but when the questions come, you're able to be prepared and can communicate the truth of those questions. So, like, one that will come up is Christmas coming around. Well, so-and-so, this has already happened in our house this year. So-and-so says they get presents from Santa Claus and their parents. Is that what happens at our house? And having to navigate that to where they're not running back to the school. And so what we try to do in that, and this is just the Ryan home, is we take it to the imagination, a gift that we have from God. Like, hey, we know the gospel is true, but God also gives us imagination, and it's fun. Just like you like to dress up and play, and we watch these movies that we know aren't real, but it's still fun to be a part of. Like that's something that's what Santa Claus is like. It's fun, and Easter Bunny, like, we can still do those things. But we may not make as big of a deal of it as other people, and that's fine. You don't have to run around and tell everybody, all that. But you can't. It is a chance for you to talk about Christ if you want to. That would be fantastic. So, trying to balance those things, so that we're not getting phone calls all the time, as the bad parents, but also so that we're being truthful. We're letting our kids know, and like Carlton was saying, our kids should go, well, of course Santa's not the main point.
Yeah, I
of
was
that.
going to say,
of
like,
course,
you know,
that's
your kids get old enough,
Yeah.
and they say, "Is Santa real?" And the thing I always used to do is say, "What do you think?"
Yeah.
I wouldn't answer the question, and then at different ages, different ones said, "Yeah, I don't think that's real."
Well, and here's
Okay.
a great point to that. As you were talking about earlier about your kids dressing up, Piper still dresses up as a princess quite a bit. She rides with a princess carriage that we
Yeah.
bought her. And if you ask Piper about who she's going to marry, she's going to tell you me. And I've tried to explain to her how that that she's not hearing it. She is marrying me, and there's no other question about it. And so I don't feel the need to change that in her mind, right? There is going to come a natural day where she realizes, oh, that's not how that works. And let that flow out naturally. And to go along with that, I would say, just to take pressure off all you young parents, if we've put any on there, hopefully we haven't. But your kids are going to pick up what Carlton said earlier, your values, the everyday things that you're sowing. So if you think that writing secular celebration is going to win the day, it's not. Or if you think that not doing it a certain way is going to lose the day, wrong again, right? So what you're sowing every day, these celebrations, man, I'm not saying they're not important. I think you Noel Piper says it good that those traditions safeguard the values. That's super helpful, and that is a wonderful book. But I would say, as we close, I would just admonish parents this way, like I know we've got tons of young parents. As you're doing this, Casey and I think probably 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, started getting really erratic about this kind of like, we got to come up with our traditions. What are they? What are they? We got to concrete them in. We got to get them going.
Fall into them.
Exactly. And it's
A lot
like,
of times.
you do. It's like throwing spaghetti on a
Try
wall.
a lot of different stuff.
Trial and error. Man, we tried to make this significant. That was a fail.
Yeah.
Like, that might work for 15-year-olds, not for our 5-year and 6-year, whatever. So just throw spaghetti on a wall. Try to see what works every year, what doesn't work, make adjustments, those kind of things. And so,
Love Jesus and have fun.
yeah,
That's right.
Love
man.
Jesus and have fun.
We're about to make a
man.
T-shirt
That is
now.
so good.
Christian, we need a T-shirt.
Want to have fun, laugh with them,
Have a good time.
Have a good time, celebrate,
Yeah.
try things, relax. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing I would say as a parent. Like, just try to relax a little bit, and not relax in the sense that you disregard the truth,
Right. Yeah.
but relax in the sense that your child is not going to be corrupted by their friend who comes to school talking about Santa Claus. And they don't need to feel the pressure to go on an evangelistic tour to unconvince everybody in the room that Santa Claus isn't real. And they they just need to feel the same relaxation you do.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's fun. We celebrate too. We give each other gifts and we go and go to the church service at our church. Man, we do that. They're not going to, and then the other kids like, oh, that's pretty neat. Like, and then they just go around the room telling all their different things. Your child will be fine. They're not going to be corrupted.
And as Carlton was encouraging us as a church to have grace for each other, and as Corey has given the same admonishment here, have grace for yourself. Like it's okay to mess it up.
Yeah.
It's okay to go, well, that didn't work. We'll try again. Have some grace for yourself. Love Jesus.
Yeah.
Have
Love
fun.
Jesus,
Love your
have
family.
fun. We're about to get a church sign.
Yeah. We're so excited about the Reformation celebration.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
Make plans to be there and invite a lot of people to it. It will be a blast.
Love to have it.
Yep. Well, thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next week on the podcast.
Thank you.